Welcome back, boxing fans, to another installment of Corner to Corner Boxing. This is Louie, joined by Carlos.
What's up, guys?
So, this is a delayed version of the fight hangover, but we had some great events this past Saturday, so we wanted to make sure that we touched on them. First, we had in London Anthony Joshua versus the very game last minute replacement Robert Helenius. And in Arizona, we had the battle for Mexico, Emmanuel Navarrete versus Oscar Valdez. So let's jump into it.
I'm the best ever. I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been. There's no one can stop me.
Carlos, what are your thoughts on AJ versus Helenius?
Look, dude, ultimately we got what we all wanted, which was to set up a potential showdown between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder. I think that's what everyone was looking at in terms of this fight. That was the primary objective, especially when you have a common opponent, right? There's always that comparison that is made when two fighters that are on a collision course have a similar or the same opponent, right? So first things first, props to Helenius. He stepped in big time on literally a week's notice. He had fought the weekend prior and stepped up and saved the show. He was in the fight. He was doing well, but ultimately AJ persevered. He had a very methodical, some would even call it a very patient, maybe even a gun-shy approach, safety-first approach. But ultimately, he got the job done, set up that amazing knockout with just a beautiful setup. So it was great.
Yeah, man. And, AJ has had a lot of great knockouts in his career. And I think that this past weekend's knockout will make, his career highlight reel, the top three, top five knockouts of his career all day. It was a beautiful punch. And it's funny that you bring up that I guess gun shy approach, right? That very,
Safety
I
first.
guess, yeah, safety first type of approach. That's really in line with what Derek James's camp does, right? He's really focused on fundamentals. If you noticed, AJ's jab in this fight looked as sharp as ever. I wouldn't call this necessarily his best performance, but when you have a guy that's like I said, game as hell, and Robert Helenius and a last minute replacement, we know that a lot of times when you're thrown in there against a last minute guy, it can really shake up your game plan, right? Because you've been in camp 6, 8 weeks preparing for one particular style, and then literally days before the main event, you're thrown a curveball, so you have to adjust on the fly, basically.
Yeah, look, you can say that if you want to be nice, you can certainly say that it was the opponent, right? But I think what most people are gonna say, and rightfully so, is Joshua just hasn't been the same in terms of his demeanor, in terms of his confidence, in terms of his aggressive style since Andy Reese. If you look at his fights prior, he was a destroyer. He would come at you. He had all the confidence in the world, and he fought like a person that wanted to be the undisputed champion, the baddest man on the planet. And ever since that night at MSG where he met Andy Reese, it seems like something has changed in his psyche. It's almost weird in a sense because Anthony Joshua takes all the fights, he says all the right things, and he actually puts action behind his words. There's many heavyweights out there that claim to be the best, but very few of them take on all challenges. Anthony Joshua
Yeah,
does.
yeah,
So
and
it's go ahead.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, I'm not saying the performance was good, right? Like I'm looking for the positive in this, but I always think that it's unfair for us to judge his progression or at least his performance in this fight, considering he had this replacement 4 or 5 days before the fight. Like that's a really harsh take on it, right? Because Robert Helenius is a big guy. He's a true heavyweight. You know, like I said, he's game as hell. He's had a really great late career resurgence. So he was a live dog in there. But you're right. Like, I feel like post Breeze, it looks like he just lost a lot of confidence in his chin. And, you know, you said it, pre-Rees, he was a destroyer. He was really great offensively, but his defense was always kind of suspect, right? And that just kind of demonstrates, like, he had never really been hit like he was when Rees stopped him. So I think now he's a lot more cautious to the point where it's showing in his offensive output.
I look, I agree, and not to be critical of AJ because, like I said, in many ways, AJ personifies what you want from a heavyweight champion, right? If you look at his resume, he's been fighting the who's who in the heavyweight division more consistently than any other heavyweight out there. I don't care if your name is Wilder. I don't care if your name is Fury. I don't care if your name is Usyk. If you compare resume to resume, AJ comes out on top. So that's the main thing that I think we all have to applaud Anthony Joshua. However, if we're going to be positive, we also have to be realistic. And the reality is that Anthony Joshua is at a point in his career where he is only going to be satisfied, and the public, his fans, are only going to be satisfied with the biggest fights. And I'm talking about Wilder, and I'm talking about Fury. He already went down the Usyk road. That didn't pan out for him. So the only two options that are left for him are Wilder and Fury. He needs to get past Wilder first. So just looking at Wilder, if he comes in with that conservative safety first, let's be cautious, and if he gets hit the same way that he got hit by Helenius, I don't think that he makes it out of the fight.
He's going to sleep.
Because with Wilder, this is the way I look at any fight with Wilder. I think it starts off at a 50-50. Because when you possess the insane, beyond human power that Deontay Wilder possesses, every fight is 50-50, right? However, there is a blueprint on how to beat Wilder. The blueprint started in Fury versus Wilder 1 in the 12th round after Fury got knocked down, and then he came back up and realized, look, I have to win the rest of this round because it's the last round, and the judges are going to remember this. He started pushing Wilder back, and he did the same thing in the second fight, got an amazing, brutal stoppage. In the third fight, Wilder made some adjustments, but the game plan by Fury was the same. Let's push this guy back. Let's make him fight on the back foot. And we all realize that that's not what Wilder likes to do. That's what Fury has to do. If he's got a chance of beating Wilder, which I think he does, Joshua needs to do the same thing to Wilder. Right. Otherwise,
and sorry to cut you off, but you know, one thing to point out is that between the first and the second fight, Fury switched trainers. He went to Sugar Hill, and Sugar Hill is really good about that style, teaching fighters how to use that fucking 6'9", 250, 260-pound frame and use that to their advantage. Previous to that, Fury's style was, you know, very...
He was a boxer.
Yeah, he was a boxer. He danced a lot. He's a slick as shit guy, right? But in the second and third fight, since moving over to that new trainer, we saw a different type of beast in there, which Wilder doesn't like being in there against. My point is that Derek James doesn't really have that style. We've seen it in his last two fights. His style, and we've seen it with his camp. Although he's a great trainer, he has great fighters. I don't think that's really his forte, because we know Joshua's a big boy, right? He's probably going to outweigh Wilder by 30, maybe 40 pounds on fight day.
Yep.
But I don't know that Derek James possesses that blueprint to teach Joshua how to use his weight effectively in there like a Sugar Hill type of trainer will.
Yeah, look, that's a good point. I think if you're the trainer of the year, you have to have a repertoire that goes beyond a specific style, right? Because every opponent is different, right? So if you approach the same style with every different opponent, you're bound to lose a few fights. So I think we should give Derek James a bit more credit. He's obviously a very intelligent trainer. I think
Right.
if he's noticing this, if we're noticing this, he's definitely going to notice this. I don't think that he can have Anthony Joshua go out there and the direction would be, hey, AJ, box this guy up for 12 rounds. I really don't think that that's going to be the strategy. If it is, I don't think that AJ makes it out of the fight without being knocked out. I think there's about an 80% chance that if he implements that strategy, if AJ implements that strategy, that he gets knocked out. Versus if he goes right at him and closes the distance, I think it's a 50-50 firefight. And I think with Joshua's superior combination punching, with his superior fundamentals, with his superior speed even, I think he can catch Wilder. And I think if AJ catches Wilder, Wilder will go to sleep. It's just about who catches who first.
Yeah, and I think at what distance, right? Because if we're looking at this, Joshua is going to have that advantage, like you said, just like Fury did at fighting on the inside for two reasons. One, because Wilder doesn't like that space or that distance, and Joshua we've seen can generate more pop on those, short range shots. Where Wilder, he's a tall, skinny, lanky guy. He needs proper distance to generate that torque on that nasty right hand that he has, or he has power in both hands, but he generally needs to land that from the second level distance, right? So I think you're right. I just don't know. It's one thing to say it, right? Like it's one thing to say, hey, you got to get in on him and you got to put your weight on him, but fuck, like I don't think we give enough credit to Deontay Wilder's distance management and his jab, because the only person that's been able to do that so far has been Tyson Fury, right?
And Tyson Fury is an all-time great and a unique talent.
Yeah, and Wilder has literally a lights out button, in his glove, and anybody not named Tyson Fury gets hit with those shots and they're going to sleep. So but it's intriguing that fight. It's been marinating for what, 5-6 years. I mean, it's a long time coming. They've both had some some road bumps in their careers over the last couple of years, so it's kind of been put on the back burner. But now that it's on the horizon, it's pretty exciting.
I agree. We got to remember, before Spence Crawford, before Fury versus Usyk, there was the fight that everyone wanted to see was AJ versus Wilder. That's where the heavyweight division was heading. Wilder had 3 of the belts. AJ had 3 of the belts. Wilder had the WBC belt. Everyone wanted to see that clash, and obviously a few things happened. Fury happened, Usyk happened, Andrew Reese happened. But at the end of the day, that's the fight that everyone wanted to see, and I still want to see it, because ultimately it's going to come – that fight is going to be about who's better, right? And everyone in the U.S., I would say most people in the U.S. are going to be riding with Wilder. The U.K., which I've openly said are some of the best, if not the best fans in boxing, they're going to be riding with their guy AJ, and it's going to be an epic clash. I'm really excited. I hope that fight happens, and when it does, I hope that AJ can make some adjustments from this previous performance, because Wilder's going to come bomb squad ready to put him to sleep.
Right. Yeah. So AJ should definitely invest in some egg weights to pack his gloves with. Tyson Fury did it. Yeah. Well, dude. So we had another great fight that same day in Arizona. Like I said, the battle for Mexico. Emmanuel Navarrete Oscar Valdez, dude, we were. I mean, I liked the fight, right? But I think the level of, I guess you can call it propaganda that we had going into this fight, like they were literally paralleling this fight with not only every notable Mexico versus Mexico matchup you can think of, but specifically they were putting this fight next to one of the best trilogies in boxing, which is Barrera versus Morales. What did that fight live up to the expectations that we were promised through the promotion?
Look, I think we have to be objective, and the answer to that question is complex. But the answer is yes, and the answer is no.
Nah.
No, hold on. Let me explain. Let me
Okay.
explain. So the
I'm going to ask
answer
for
is
a real answer though after your explanation.
yeah. So the answer is no, right?
Okay.
If you compare it to Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera, the answer is no. If you compare it to Rafael Marquez and Israel Vasquez, right? The answer is no if you compare it to the creme of the creme of Mexico versus Mexico, right? However, that's if you believe that heavy programming that Top Rank was giving us, right? If you believed and you sipped on that Kool-Aid and you had your popcorn ready and you were, I mean, they were like 1 degree of separation from advertising this as like Pancho Villa versus Emiliano Zapata, like just two Mexican
Yeah.
folk heroes, right? It was just this thing where they almost try to like hypnotize us, like, hey, this is
Right.
going to be a great Mexican war. This is going to be a great Mexican war. If you're an astute boxing connoisseur, you knew that the ingredients of this fight, the two opponents, just didn't have the same flair that some of these other fights had. However, the reason why I'm saying yes is because the Mexican boxing ethos is much more than just Barrera versus Morales or Israel Vasquez versus Rafael Marquez. Really, the core ingredient of this Mexican war, right? This Mexican boxing ethos is that you have two boxers that no matter what won't give up, and they're going to try to win in every second and every minute of that fight. And I think from that perspective, I have to say yes, because we saw a Valdez who literally could not see from one eye for a good portion of the fight. His eye was swollen up, it was completely shut, and he did not give up for 1 second. And then on the other hand, we have Emmanuel Navarrete, whose hand wasn't working for several rounds in that fight. And yet he did not give up an inch and he did not stop coming forward. So from that perspective, we did get what was advertised, which was that Mexican fighting spirit. It was a very entertaining fight, but no, it's not in the same tier or level as Barrera versus Morales. And guess what? Very few fights are, so you can't really be too hard on that.
Yeah, no, I think I more have a problem with, like I said, the level of propaganda or programming, as you call it, going into the fight, because it's almost blasphemous to compare any fight that hasn't happened yet to to a fight of or a trilogy of that caliber. I will say it was a very entertaining fight. I think it it stood up well, right? Like it was the best card of probably in the top 3 fights of the year so far. I wouldn't call it the fight of the year. Personally, I think, if I had to pick right now, I'd probably go Haney Loma as the fight of the year, runner up so far, or the leading fight so far. Then you got Munguia, Deverenchenko, and then maybe this fight. Solely because of some of the things that you mentioned. It was, you had fucking Emmanuel Navarrete throwing. I don't know if he averaged over 100 punches around, but he probably did. He threw over 1,000 punches. And then just, the warrior spirit of Valdez and Navarrete, like you mentioned, he was fighting through an injured hand for, a little less than half the fight. What did you think about each fighter's performance in this fight?
Well, look,
Let's start with Valdez. He lost the fight. Let's start with Valdez, and then we'll move on to Navarrete.
So look, Valdez came in as a favorite, and I think that was he deserved to be the favorite just based on his resume, just based on his pedigree as an Olympic level boxer, right? And if you look at Valdez on paper, he had the more solid fundamentals, he had the more responsible and maybe the more conventional type of boxing approach, and a lot of pundits saw that as an advantage, right? So,
Yeah.
I think you've said it. You've said it many times that Valdez has many great attributes, but he doesn't necessarily put those things together in any specific fight. I think maybe Valdez's biggest curse recently has been that amazing success and that amazing knockout of the year that he had over Birchlet a few fights ago, right? Because he caught him with an amazing left hook, and we all know that that's Valdez's primary weapon. But I feel in this fight, he relied on that way too much. And he didn't have a plan B. He didn't have a creative way to set that up, especially considering that he was going up against a guy that's, just body type is so unique, right? A guy that has very long arms. He comes in with an awkward style, awkward angles.
Right.
He seemed limited, right? So Valdez can't take anything away from his warrior spirit. He wanted to go in there. He was doing the best he could. He just seemed to lack creativity in this fight, and honestly, it's a bit concerning because once you get past that amazing knockout of Birchlet, he hasn't looked as convincing in his last couple fights, and I'm not sure where Valdez goes from here. He's at a difficult crossroads.
Yeah. And, anybody that listened to the breakdown going into this fight last week, I picked Valdez to win by decision, understanding that this was a 50-50 toss-em type of fight. But you said it, man. Like, we know that Valdez can throw combinations. We know that he's a great counter puncher. We know that he has great lateral movement, that he has great defense. Half those things were missing in this fight, right? Notably, the lateral movement. He just couldn't seem to figure out the distance. He kept going straight back. And where you're fighting a guy who fucking... Navarrete looks like, his body type looks like if Frankenstein and Gumby had a baby. Like, he's just this big guy fucking plodding forward that doesn't feel any pain, it seems. And, his arms seem to extend another couple of inches once he fucking throws a punch. Like, it's the craziest shit, right? But how do you solve that? Because he was having some success, especially after Navarrete hurt his right hand, landing that left hook that he was looking for. However, like you said, he wasn't being creative. He couldn't take the step outside like he did against Berchel and land it, right? So, I don't know. Like, Eddie Reynoso is a great trainer. However, there's, just like anything, there's a ceiling that you're going to hit working with the same team, or, maybe Eddie Reynoso has done all he can for Valdez as a fighter. Do you think that maybe switching trainers or teams might be in the cards for Valdez or worth his while?
I think it is for a few reasons. Because there's already been rumors that Valdez and Reynoso may not continue to work together. Even before this fight, there's been rumors about that. And
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be some type of split where it's not, a mutually respectful split. I just think when you're Valdez and you look at your resume over the last few fights and you go back and maybe assess and realize, look, these haven't been my best performances. I know Valdez is the type of fighter that's putting in everything that he has in training. Maybe he just looks at it as, look, I've tried everything else. You and I, Eddie, have done everything. We've put in all the work together. Maybe I just need to try something different for my own career. And I think Eddie Reynoso would respect that. I think at this point in his career, Oscar Valdez owes it to himself to explore that possibility. That's not saying that Eddie Reynoso is not a great trainer. That's not saying that Valdez is not a loyal person. It's just a professional decision at this point. And I think it is in the cards, to be honest. I would not be surprised if I heard that Oscar Valdez was exploring a different training camp.
Yeah, and I don't bring this up as a slight to Eddie Reynoso. I mean, he's a great, wonderful trainer. Um, and like I alluded to earlier when we were talking about Joshua working with Derek James, although, any trainer, this is a fan forum. We're talking as fans, right? These guys do this for a living. They're professionals. Whatever
Of
we
course.
see, they see before we see it, and in a deeper, different way. So
Right.
of course, Eddie Reynoso, has noticed some of the things we've noticed and more. However, he's human, right? Like just like any trainer, they're going to have their inherent natural way of training a fighter, which
Of course.
can limit, can limit the development of that fighter in some cases. There's very few fighters. I think the only one that I can think of that went their whole career, and I'm sure there's more, but that went their whole career with one trainer is probably Floyd. I can't think of too many other
Well,
fighters. I'm sure there's more. That's the one that just came to my
no,
head.
I'm sure that there's more, but Floyd had Floyd Sr. and Roger Mayweather. So,
Well, yeah, there you go. But I mean, well, it's like his dad and his uncle, right? But
right.
and he really like left Floyd after Roger started to decline mentally, right? So he really stuck with Roger for the most of his career when he had the opportunity to work with him. But either way, like even Floyd, like you pointed out, there hasn't been many fighters that have stuck with a singular trainer. Actually, Canelo. I mean, Canelo's been with Eddie Reynoso for his whole career. But other
Yeah,
than that,
look, there's a lot of
it's
examples, but I don't think the point I think that you're trying to make, or at least the point that I would make in that conversation, is that there shouldn't be a stigma like there is when you switch a trainer, right? Because I think the stigma could be like, hey, you're disloyal or like you're turning your back. But at the end of the day, whenever there's professional development, there's got to be things that need to come in from different perspectives. In business, you have corporations hire different consultants and take a look at things from different angles. These guys, especially at this level, are essentially all businesses, right? And not only are they businesses, but they're high level athletes, and high level athletes, whether it's LeBron James versus Lionel Messi, they don't have just one trainer. They have a team of different trainers, and that benefits them because they become better. You need different perspectives. So my point is, look, it shouldn't be a stigma. It shouldn't be considered something negative. It should be something considered that's healthy and a normal progression for any person who's trying to achieve greatness.
yeah. No, that's a great point. Thank you for helping drive home my direction, my rant with lack of direction. That was great. That's you took the words right out of my mouth. That's what we make a great team.
No problem, dude.
Dude, but what about Navarrete, man? Like this guy, we knew he was a dog, right? But one of the reasons that I picked, and a lot of people picked Oscar Valdez to win this fight, is because of his deep resume. Where Navarrete, at least on paper, Valdez is the best fighter he's ever fought. And,
Right.
it was a good, exciting fight, but it wasn't close. I don't agree with the scorecards. I don't think it was 11 rounds to 1, 10 rounds to 2. But certainly the right guy won, and there was a clear winner in this fight.
There was a clear winner, and,
Yeah.
and it was Navarrete.
Yeah. What are your impressions of his performance, and where do you think he goes from here?
So a few things. I'm sure you've been seeing the headlines, and this has been all over the news, even though it's been kind
Shakur?
of no, something
Oh
completely
no.
different.
Okay.
Something completely different, right? But I'm sure you've seen that there's been all these articles coming up that the U.S. government and different governments are admitting that there's fucking like aliens and UFO sightings and all these things, and it's like, dude, like fucking Navarrete is some type of fucking alien himself because this guy Like, I didn't believe these reports until I saw this fucking guy fight, go through 12 fucking brutal rounds, and he comes out picture perfect. He's giving interviews, and he looks like no one's fucking touched him. No one scratched him up. He looks like almost better than when he started the fight because he's got a little bit of sweat. He's got a little bit of, adrenaline pumping through his veins. Like, that's not normal. His fucking physique is not normal. This guy started at a very low weight class, and he's got arms that are like the length of middleweights, right? Like, this guy, I am so impressed by his conditioning. The pace of the fight, it seemed like Valdez was giving it his all. What he was like just sprinting and trying to make something happen. And Navarrete really looked like he was just jogging. Like, the pace of the fight was like, it was almost easy for him. He was just jogging in the fight, and that pace is so deceptive because you know that if you throw that many punches in a round, you have to be exerting so much energy. It didn't seem like it based on the way that Navarrete looked, and it didn't seem like it based on the way that Navarrete was breathing in between rounds. I'm very impressed by Navarrete. He's such a unique talent.
Yeah, dude. I can only imagine how fucking demoralizing it is to be in there with a guy like that. Like, literally a fucking Frankenstein type of guy, right? Like, this
fucking
guy
alien,
just,
bro.
yeah, like he's just plodding forward. He's not fast at all. Like, now Valdez clearly had the speed advantage in this fight, but it's just there's something about the way he throws his punches. Obviously, they're awkward, right? Like, he turns hooks into uppercuts. He has really long arms, which must make it a nightmare to try to gauge the distance, right? Because it just seems like his arms extend at the end of the punch. It's the weirdest shit. But his punches are slow, but they have a specific, like a rhythm to them where they still land, and they land hard. Like, especially in the first 2-3 rounds, I was seeing these punches land on Valdez, and you can just tell they were not only hurting him physically and demoralizing the shit out of him, but there was a point where I thought he was going to get stopped early on. Like, if this kept going, he was going to get stopped, it looked like. I mean, Valdez, he's the type of dude that wins fights with a broken jaw, so you can never count him out. But I think that, if Navarrete wouldn't have, I don't know if he broke his hand, but he certainly hurt his hand. I think it was in the 6th or 7th round. It might have been a different fight in the second half of the, of the match, because he just wasn't throwing that right hand, and that gave the opportunity to Valdez, to land some shots of his own, close the distance on the scorecard a little bit. But dude, like, this guy, it's so weird to watch him fight, right? Because you watch boxing and it's supposed to look a certain way, and he just doesn't do those things. But
he's an outlier for sure.
Yeah, he's like his style is not like this, but it's like watching what was the Drunken Master, Emmanuel Augustus? Remember that guy?
Yeah.
It's like almost like something like that, right? Like, obviously their styles are completely different, but it's just so bad that it's
just
good.
Unique. It's just so unique.
And again, there's so many problems with fighting a guy like that, right? Like, he's slow, but he's kind of fast at the same time. He has that rhythm that makes it really hard to time, and he's awkward as shit. So imagine, like, how do you prepare for that? Like, trying to find a sparring partner to mimic that. Like, good fucking luck.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's so bad that it's good.
That was a bad analogy, but what I mean. From an aesthetic perspective of what boxing is supposed to look like this guy, by the book,
it's so different.
It's not that.
Yeah, because
it's so different.
I really enjoyed watching Emmanuel Augustus back in the day.
Right.
Emmanuel Burton, right? His original moniker, his original name, and then I really enjoyed this performance by Emmanuel Navarrete. It's unique. That's what it is. He's a unique physical and boxing talent, and quite honestly, I think it's very refreshing. I think he's going to pump some life into that 130 division. You mentioned it earlier. I think that's where you thought I was going, but I kind of went in the direction of aliens, kind of strangely. But you were
Yeah,
talking about Shakur Stevenson. Um, Look, Navarrete is game. He's gonna fight. If they offer him Shakur, he'll fight Shakur. Now, is that the best fight out there? I don't think so. Shakur's just at a different level. I think the limitations that Valdez had in terms of exposing, because there are flaws in Navarrete's game,
there's a
Shakur
ton.
would be able to expose. I almost want to say with ease, right? And he would. There's certain levels, and it's almost cliche to say, but styles make fights. I think the style of Shakur Stevenson is just so razor sharp that even an awkward, uniquely physically gifted talent like Navarrete with that amazing pace and that amazing rhythm would still not be able to fluster a supremely talented and efficient Shakur Stevenson. So I don't like that matchup. I'm not excited about it because I think there's better matchups for Navarrete at 130. And Stevenson, I think there's better fights at him at 135. He's a 135 pounder. Go out and seek the biggest challenges in that weight class. There's many.
Yeah, no, I think that's a bad style matchup for, I mean, not only Navarrete, for a lot of guys, because Shakur is supremely talented, like you said. I think, I don't know, I think he just boxes Navarrete's ears off. And that's, not a slight in any way, because you can say that about 95% of other boxers out there in or around that weight class that Shakur's in. So, but the other thing you mentioned, there's a lot of good fights for Navarrete at his weight class at 130. But from me looking at Shakur, like, this guy is a guy that a lot of people have in their pound for pound list. And I think, I don't think I have him there yet. It's been a while since I made a top 10 pound for pound, but if he's not in there, he's, on the fringes of making the top 10. Because we all know that, my top 10 is the only one that matters. But, for a guy that's in that discussion, like, you shouldn't be fighting these type of fights, right? You should be going after the Haney's, the Delfimos,
The Davis.
the Tanks, exactly, or even Lomachenko. Like, those are the fights that you should be taking, right? To really cement yourself as a pound for pound talent. Shakur is a really young fighter. He has a bright future, but I think that's what we need to see. We don't want to see him. I don't want to say squander, but take these fights that really, on the grand scale of things, don't mean much, right? Because adding Navarrete to to his resume at this point in his career and Navarrete's career really won't do much to elevate him in the pound for pound conversation.
Right. Other than maybe keeping him active, and it might
Right.
be some type of.
I mean, you never know. You never know what if Navarrete like continues this crazy tear he's on. Again, Valdez is his biggest name yet, but if you keeps winning at 130, he wins a few fights at 135, a few fights down the line, it might make sense to make this fight, and that might be a scalp that, I mean, who wouldn't like to have Shakur's scalp, or in Shakur's case, once Navarrete lays that foundation of bigger wins, that might be a scalp he might want to take. That'll legitimize him.
It's possible. It's possible that in the future, but for now, I'm really excited about Shakur fighting the guys at 135, and I'm excited that Navarrete is at 130. I think he's going to stir some things up. We spoke about the programming that was happening before this fight. I think there's already programming happening that this fight is going to turn into the next great trilogy within the Mexican rivalry. I don't know if I want to see that right now, because I mean, we have a guy with really one hand for a good portion of the fight, was able to get a decisive and very clear win over Valdez, right? So to me, the reason why he didn't live up to you mentioned Barrera versus Morales, which is the gold standard of Mexican rivalry. It didn't live up to that because it just, quite frankly, wasn't competitive enough. And when I look at a trilogy, when I sign up for a trilogy, the main thing that I see in that first fight, the main ingredient is competitiveness. And in this fight, it just wasn't competitive enough for me. I want both of those guys to go in different directions. I think they can both potentially be successful in the future. Maybe their paths cross later on, but not right now.
Yeah, I scored that fight 8-4. Obviously in Navarrete's favor, but I think at least 2 or 3 of those rounds, where Valdez was able to win those rounds, were because Navarrete couldn't use his right hand. So, you back out that mid-fight injury, this fight could very well be a wash or even a stoppage in Navarrete's favor. So, yeah, I agree. I don't think it warrants a rematch. It certainly doesn't warrant, the parallels that it's getting to, to the Morales-Barrera trilogy, which is, and not many fights or trilogies, can live up to that. Like there's
absolutely, it's a very high bar.
Exactly, man. Speaking of Mexican warriors, we have Canelo defending his undisputed 168-pound reign against the undisputed 154-pound champion Canelo Charlo. Did you see the press conference today?
Yeah, I saw the press conference, and look, it's one of those things where even though there wasn't too much action, right? It wasn't a heated press conference. You already know that Canelo has that fire in his eyes. This guy, if there's one common denominator in great Mexican champions, I want to say it's just their temperament. They just snap at like any little thing. When you go back to Julio Cesar Chavez, this guy can be smiling and happy, and then you make some, joke that he doesn't like, and he's ready to kick your ass then and there.
You say motherfucker, it slaps
right? You say motherfucker, and you take that literally, and he snaps at you. I've seen an interview where Canelo Alvarez is getting ready to fight against Juan Manuel Marquez, who's retired.
Yeah,
Mexican legend, a few weight classes down, but these guys just snap. We saw Barrera just snap during fights where he just, or in press conferences. These guys, there's something about, a great Mexican champion that just never forgets, takes things super personally, and is getting ready to kick your ass no matter what. Let's not pretend that Canelo doesn't know or didn't hear Charlo saying that he can kick his ass. Like, Canelo doesn't do things by accident. Canelo is a dude that literally probably has a fucking journal of people who he wants to beat up and fucking humiliate in the ring. And at the very top of that fucking journal is Charlo. And this guy is just like, he's like the most dangerous type of dude because he's quiet, but you ask him some questions and he just looks at you and gives you a cryptic answer, and you're like, fuck, this guy's like an assassin. Like, this guy's like maybe even a psychopath. Like, there was an interviewer that asked him, hey, so you haven't looked so good in your last few fights and this and that. And Canelo just looks at him like, all right, well, just tune in September 30th and we'll see. Let's just see what happens. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, this guy's just so fucking confident. Like, all right, look, I hear all of that. Just tune in. We'll see. I had a few injuries, just tune in, right? It's like, fuck, like, what does this guy have planned? I think what he has planned is just a fucking beatdown.
Yeah, dude. And they're both, the whole press conference, both teams were very professional. Just like Canelo has that, mean streak in, so does Charlo. However, there's a difference in the level of fights that these two guys have been involved in, right? Like, Canelo's been in this big stage for the last 10 years since he fought Floyd, and ever since then he's been putting on these marquee pay-per-view type of events. He's been the face of boxing for the last half a decade at least, so this is nothing new to him. where, you and I were at Jermell Charlo's fight against Castaño when he became the undisputed
Great
154
fight.
champion. Yeah, in the mecca of West Coast boxing, which is the Dignity Health Sports Arena in Carson, right? But we know, although that arena is a great boxing venue and is great for, there's just an aura to that place. I think there's been 2 or 3 fights of the year, at that arena that just breeds great boxing. But we know that that's not an arena where major marquee events take place, right? Where if Canelo, who did he unify against? Was it against Caleb Plant? Or when he became undisputed, was that the last champ he beat?
Smith?
I think it was Caleb Smith? No, I think it was Plant, dude. Whoever it was, right?
Yeah,
but
Plant.
There was a difference. Yeah, it was Plant, but there was a difference between Canelo's coronation at 168 and Jermell Charlo's coronation at 154. Even like the Spence Crawford fight, right? That was a major event. So my point with that is that Canelo has been operating at a much higher level in terms of production and just, the eyes that have been on him and the stage, the size of the stage that he's been operating at. So you can tell that Jermell was a little bit nervous when he came up and he spoke for the first time when he took the podium. He seemed confident, but he was a little shook. Like he's never had this many bright lights on him. So, I think that can definitely play a role in this fight.
I completely agree. I think Canelo's greatness is something that is really underappreciated by boxing fans today. And I know he's the face of boxing. I know he's the biggest star of the sport. But let me put it to you this way. Crawford just had an all-time great performance where he beat Errol Spence, and everyone is celebrating him, rightfully so, as a number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world, right? And he deserves that credit because he's an amazing fighter. But if you look at it from a different lens, I think it makes you appreciate Canelo even more. Terence Crawford is older than Canelo, right? Everyone is hypothetically matching up Terence Crawford and Floyd Mayweather. Everyone is saying, look, what if those 2 guys would have fought and they would have met in their primes, or they would have just fought in general? What would have happened, right? Like, everyone's thinking of that, but we're forgetting, like, if that's some type of hypothetical matchup, it's not a hypothetical matchup. Those guys were fighting at the fucking same time. Crawford is older than Canelo, yet Canelo was so great early on in his career that he actually did face Floyd Mayweather. So the point I'm trying to make is that Canelo has been fighting the best of the best. He was so good early on that he had a chance to fight against Floyd Mayweather. He's been doing this for such a long time that I really think we don't really understand how amazing Canelo's career has been. Now that we're watching it unfold, I think once he retires and once we look back and say, what the fuck? This guy's been fighting everyone since he's been early 20s. Like, this is insane.
Yeah. And I'll be the first to say it, especially with the Triple G trilogy. Triple G was a great fighter that came up in LA, and he was really adored by the Mexican American fans here in LA. I was one of them. I was very critical of Canelo during that, Triple G Canelo build up during those first fights, but it's almost like Floyd, right? Like most Mexican American boxing fans hated guys like Floyd and Pacquiao because they were always fucking up Mexican or Mexican American fighters. But then you look back and you're like, fuck, Pacquiao was amazing. Pacquiao was a once in a lifetime type of fighter. So was Floyd, right? And I think that's where we're a lot more people that were once critical of Canelo, like myself, are really, I guess we're towards the tail end of his career. And we're reflecting on how great his career was. The guy is a throwback fighter. There's not many fighters that have over 60 wins and started fighting when they were 15 years old. It just doesn't happen as much anymore. So, Yeah, man, I agree. I think he's a very underrated fighter, and just like most great fighters are, they're they're underrated during their stretch. Like I think even Floyd was underrated for the majority of his career. Um, and it wasn't really until late in their career or after they retired that people really appreciated what they've done for the sport.
Yeah, completely agree. And the main criticism in this fight, even though I'm very excited about it, and I think most fans are, was look at the size difference, right? Canelo's 168 picking on the poor little 154 pounder. Did you see those
Yeah.
guys face up? I
No,
mean,
dude.
like
No,
they
no.
faced off, and Charlo's fucking bigger than Canelo. I mean, let's just say it how it is. I understand that there's a difference in body frame and things like that, but dude, this is not a bully going after a smaller guy. If Canelo was a normal type of fighter, these are the fights that he should be fighting against Charlo, against guys that are his size, not going up against guys that are bigger. Again, this goes back to Canelo is underappreciated because he's done things that put him so high above the competition that when he does things that are normal, like fighting fucking Charlo, who's a game opponent and has a real chance in this fight, it seems like too easy. It's crazy.
Well, I guess my biggest qualm with that is obviously, like you said, um, naturally the Charlos, both brothers, they're twins, they're fucking the same person, like two copies of the same person. Um, they're bigger than Canelo. Like
They are.
they're bigger than him, and that's one. But the other thing is, this narrative of, oh well, he picked a smaller Charlo. How the fuck is one twin smaller than the other? Like that doesn't make sense, dude. So
Yeah.
I this is not an issue. And again, do you remember that famous Bernard Hopkins, Larry Merchant interview where Bernard Hopkins calls out the junior middleweight champion of the world, which was Oscar De La Hoya at the time? And then Larry Merchant's like, isn't it embarrassing that the middleweight champion
Oh,
is
yeah.
calling the junior? Yeah, and he's like, dude, 5 years ago, there wasn't even a junior middleweight division, right? Like when we're looking at the historical divisions of boxing, it's welter, middle, light heavy, right? So
Yeah.
these guys are in like these fringe divisions where they're really both middleweights, I would say. So
Yeah.
I think when you're a guy with as many eyes on you as Canelo, or any athlete at that level, there's always going to be criticisms, right?
Right.
If he would have taken on Jamal Charlo, the guy at 160, who hasn't fought in 2 years, who's had a recent history of mental health problems, they would have said, you're beating up on a guy that's been out for 2 years. That's the fight is out. He just got slapped by Caleb Plant publicly. Like the fight is already out of this guy. Like but they can't say that. So what they're going to say is, you're fighting the smaller twin, right? Which it doesn't really, those arguments don't hold any water in my opinion. I think it's a great fight. It's undisputed champion versus undisputed champion. The only other fight that I would like to see, this was a fight out of left field. I don't think anybody was calling for this fight, but now that we got it, I'm really excited
Yeah.
for it. Jamel Charlo is a very talented fighter, and
Well, they weren't calling for this fight like recently, but Charlo versus Canelo has been something that has been building up for many years, and it just so happened that Canelo just kind of went beyond that and started doing things that were beyond the 154 and the 160 division. But if you go back a few years, that's why I said if Canelo was a normal type of fighter, these are the fights that we were calling for a few years ago. So I think it's perfect.
Yeah. So look, the only other fight, right, that we can legitimately uh, be asking for
Benavides.
is the Benavides fight, which in reality, like, yeah, I would love to see that fight. But has Benavides accomplished much at the weight? Not yet. He has one marquee win over Caleb Plant that Canelo stopped. So yeah, I would like to see the fight, but I don't think he necessarily deserves it quite yet. It's not like I don't think it's enough to call it a duck, which, I think we can all agree
No.
that Canelo, just like any other fighter, and this is a thing
And
that I'll say over and
especially
over.
Canelo.
Yeah, like these guys are not ducking fighters. Like there's very few fighters that I would say are ducking other, purposely avoiding other fighters, But these guys, they do this for a living. They're not scared of anybody. I doubt that Canelo is scared of Benavidez or vice versa. However, the fight just doesn't
I'm
make sense yet. I
100%
think that,
sure Canelo's
yeah,
not
right.
afraid of
Like,
Benavidez.
yeah, and vice versa. Like I don't think they're either one is scared of each other. But
Yeah.
I don't think that fight just makes sense yet. I think marketing undisputed versus undisputed is fuck, dude. It's going to be a big
And
event.
it's
It's
something
in
that I don't
Dallas
think
too, right?
I'm not sure where it is.
I think
I
it's in
wouldn't be
Dallas,
surprised if
dude.
it's out. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if
Yeah,
it's in Dallas. That makes
yeah.
a lot of sense, right? So one thing that isn't talked about enough in this fight is the styles of it. Dude, if you look at Charlo's last fights, this is going to be a banger because of the styles. I don't think a lot of people are talking about just how perfectly these styles are gonna mesh together, and I guarantee that we're gonna see a spectacular fight because the ingredients are there. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, no, and the styles are they're going to mesh well, and they're going to lead to a
100%.
great fight. And the other thing is that both of these guys, Canelo is coming off a couple of lackluster wins, a loss to Bivol. Jermell, they're I can't imagine that being called the smaller twin is it's very good for your ego when you're an athlete of this nature, a fighter, right? And I've heard him take offense to that. Like, I'm not the smaller fucking twin,
Dude,
but
it's
he's also,
probably I haven't. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but with twins, I think it's about who was born first. Like you're born like 3 minutes ahead of your
yeah,
twin, and you're like the big brother and stuff like that. But you're genetically the same. That's what it must be. I haven't looked at it,
I
but
don't
I
know.
guarantee that Jermell was probably born first, and that's why he's the little twin,
Yeah,
Jermell. So it's nothing. They're genetically the same person.
yeah, no, exactly. But my point is that both of these guys have something to prove, right?
Right.
Jermell, since beating Castaño, hasn't fought for about a year and a half. There's a lot of questions if, you know, basically the narrative is Canelo is picking on the smaller guy, which I'm sure when you're the fucking twin and you've been fighting with your brother, your whole life, there's even if it doesn't come out, like deep down inside your ego, it has to bug you. So there's an ego component to this matchup that's I think going to marinate and bring out the best in both fighters.
Look, that's a great point because even within siblings that aren't twins, there's always that friendly sibling rivalry, right?
Right.
And even if it's a little brother or a big brother, like where they're truly big and little brother, if a little brother, right, I'm using quotations here, can go out and do something that surpasses what the big brother should have or could have done, that's a big win, dude. So I do agree that that's a big motivator. If the little twin, if Jermell can go out and beat Canelo, he can just go back to the gym and say like, dude, I'm the big brother now. And it's not like not
Yeah.
from a bad place, but it's like, that friendly sibling rivalry, and Jermel's sticking up for his brother, right? Like he's like, all right, like my brother's got to handle a few things on his personal side right
Yeah.
now, and guess what? I'm right here, dude. Like I'm gonna stick up for the Charlo name. I'm gonna stick up for my brother, and let's see, like let's see what's up. That's fucking
Yeah.
exciting. I'm sign me up,
Dude, and another component to this is Errol Spence just lost. Over the last couple of years, Errol Spence, although Jermell was undisputed at 54 or is undisputed at 54, Errol Spence was kind of the crown jewel of that Lions only Derek James camp.
right?
And, you had him completely outclassed by Terrence Crawford. And Terrence Crawford, in the middle of the round while Errol Spence is recovering from a knockdown, basically leans over and calls Jermell a bitch. So like not only is he like there, does he have that twin, rivalry, but he also has like basically the weight of the Lions only brand to maintain. Did you see Terrence Crawford's Instagram post today where he's holding a fucking big ass fish
Yeah,
and he
and then he
tags
says,
yeah, he tags Errol Spence and he tags Jermell and he's like, I'm going after the little cub after I caught the big fish. Like, dude, it's
"That's fucking
crazy, bro.
amazing,
So if
amazing."
there's anything that's gonna bring out, the fucking, the fight of Jermel's life, it's all these things we talked about,
Yeah,
right?
dude,
Like it's
look,
just
that's perfect. That's perfect. Look, he's sticking up for the Charlo name. He's sticking up for his image, right? Like, hey, I'm not the little brother. I'm gonna show you that I'm the big brother. He's sticking up for Derek James. He's sticking up for his camp. He's sticking up for the Lions Only brand. You're right. Like, this can be the defining moment. Even though he's already been undisputed, this can be the defining moment of Jermel's career. And I agree with you. I think it's going to bring the best out of him. And I'm very excited. Now that you brought up Crawford, I do got to say, look, Crawford, amazing fighter, best pound for pound fighter today. I love that whole thing that he did with the big fish and from the beginning, right? When he posted that video where he was in the beach asking for the big fish and trying to find the big fish, it went full circle. He had that amazing parade in Omaha. He was having the net and the whole thing. And now he's saying that he's hunting for the little cub. I love it. But, dude, after seeing fucking Charlo face off with Canelo, fuck, dude. Charlo's a big guy, man. I know how good Crawford is, but, I mean, the size difference is just, it might be a little bit too much. I'm not sure, but if Charlo does well against Canelo, I'm not sure how you can sell a fight going back down a few weight classes against a guy that's much, much smaller than your most recent opponent. So it's a little bit strange, dude.
well, dude. Look, if Charlo beats Canelo, um, there's probably going to be a rematch because
I would imagine so.
at the end of the day, right? Unless it was like a Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence type win, which fuck, we were surprised at that outcome. Like, can you imagine the uproar of, if that happened to Canelo versus Charlo? Like, I probably would, change my religion. Like, I wouldn't know what to believe anymore. Like,
Yeah.
God knows that I get fucking boxing predictions wrong all the fucking time. But I don't think I'm that far out of the realm of possibility. Like, I think that would just be uh, the the biggest upset in history if that happens, right? So I don't see a Terrence Crawford Charlo fight happening unless Charlo loses to Canelo.
Yeah, I think that's the most likely scenario. I think the ideal
Yeah,
scenario is Charlo is in a competitive type fight with Canelo, has a decent showing, and then goes back. You can sell that fight with Terrence Crawford all day. But depending on the outcome, right? If he gets just like torched by Canelo, or like you said, if the opposite happens and Charlo ends up winning, like that fight with Crawford, just it might not make as much sense. But look, you could only control what you can control, right? Crawford is doing what he needs to do. He's fucking terrorizing that fucking poor team. I feel bad for them. Like, I think they're gonna need a fucking sports psychologist after Terrence Crawford is done with them. So he's
yeah.
doing what he needs to do. Canelo has to do
Look,
what he
bro,
has to do. Go ahead.
we're talking about ducking. Like, I haven't seen him call out Anthony Joshua yet, bro. That's all I'm saying.
There's certain people that would think those types of matchups can actually happen. It's weird.
Yeah, no, but you're right, dude. Like, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds because that's its own episode. But I mean, yeah, dude, what Terrence Crawford's been doing, like he has, like you said, been terrorizing the Lions only camp, dude, and um, fuck, dude, you're right. Like they might need some deeper type of therapy. From what I hear, I don't think the Errol Spence fight's gonna happen this year.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I don't think it should. I think there
Well,
should be a rematch, but I don't think it should happen yet.
Steven Espinosa
Yeah, I
said
saw
that
it,
he saw that
but I don't think it's really up to
Spence
him,
wants.
right? I don't think it's
No,
up to
no,
him.
he was saying that Spence has
Oh,
remained consistent and said that he wants to rematch. It's not going to happen this year. I don't see how that happens. It might happen next year. But look, the point that I was making, you could only control what you can control. Crawford is doing his thing. We know Canelo's laser focused and he's going to try to do his thing. Charlo could only needs to focus on Canelo. That's it. Canelo
right,
came in looking like fucking Pablo Escobar, bro, with a fucking pajama
bro,
slash drug dealer type of fucking attire. Like
bro,
this guy's ready to fucking just like take someone to the fucking back of the woods or something, dude. This guy is on
bro.
a mission, bro.
It looked like he was there to cut off somebody's pinky over a bad debt, dude. Like,
Yeah, bro.
yeah, he looked like a gangster. Uh,
You did. You could only pull
yeah,
that off if you're a fucking gangster, bro. Otherwise, it's just like, it looks like a pajama. But with the way that Canelo was rocking it, it's like, fuck, like, damn, like, Charlo, what the fuck did you get yourself into?
yeah, I definitely don't have that level of swag, nor do I think you
Absolutely
do.
not. No,
But
I
but
don't.
anyways, man, dude, it's obviously we had a lot to talk about, man. There was a lot of great fights this past weekend, and we're obviously both very excited about this upcoming undisputed versus undisputed showdown. Um, but thanks for joining me on this episode. Anything else that you wanted to say?
Nope. Nope.
All right. Well,
We're
thank
good.
you to all our listeners. This has been another installment of Corner to Corner Boxing. Thanks for listening.